Welcome to the M1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Sadu, and today we're going to be chatting about inflammation. So the word inflammation gets thrown around a lot. So I figured I'd dedicate an episode to it and explain what it actually is in not too sciencey terms, understandable terms, the pros, the cons, how you can actually tell if you're inflamed, and exactly what to do about it. So what is inflammation? The inflammatory response is actually a vital part of the immune system. So it responds to injury and infection. It's essentially the body's way of telling the immune system, there's something we don't like, so come clean up the mess. Basically, what that means is that inflammation is essentially at the root of all disease because it's how damage starts. Now, like anything in physiology and in life, there are pros and cons to inflammation, meaning we want some of it in certain situations, however, not in others. And if we continue to do things that ramp it up, we run into serious issues when it's not desired. For example, if you're out for a run and you're crossing the street, but you mistime your step on the curb and you roll your ankle, it blows up, right? There's a whole bunch of swelling. This is a super obvious form of inflammation. Now, we want your ankle to swell. That's the signal that the body gives to send resources in order to heal that ankle. It's a part of the recovery process. Evolution is brilliant. It knows what it's doing, and this is how the body repairs an ankle injury specifically. On the flip side, let's say you go out to dinner with friends to a pizza joint and you order a Hawaiian pizza because it's the best and pineapple rules, but you sub the regular cheese for some sort of cashew cheese because you don't tolerate dairy. Your pizza comes out, you eat it up, but little did you know that accidentally the kitchen used regular cheese. So you walk out of the restaurant bloated with a stomach ache and you wake up the next morning with funky skin. This is also an inflammation-driven process because your body viewed the traditional dairy product via cheese essentially as an injury, and therefore you got bloated, you got a stomach ache, and your skin acted up. We want inflammation in the rolled ankle scenario. We don't want it in the pizza situation, and that's why you eat a dairy-free diet. The bloating and the stomachache are necessary because that's how repair happens, but we don't want to actively initiate that type of inflammation, just like you don't want to roll your ankle on purpose. So what this tells us is that inflammation isn't necessarily good or bad. It's that we want the appropriate response given the situation we find ourselves in. Also, it's worth mentioning the term hormesis, okay? That's just a fancy way of saying what doesn't kill you can make you stronger within reason. For example, you go to the gym and get a hard workout in and you wake up the next day and you're pretty sore because the workout damaged your muscles. Your muscles then repair and build back slightly stronger, so the next time you go in the gym, you can lift just a little bit more weight. This is how muscle is built in a nutshell, and this term is referred to as hormesis. It's essentially building tolerance to a given stressor. But again, we want this in the gym scenario, but hormesis doesn't apply to your rolled ankle or the cheesy pizza necessarily because your ankle doesn't get stronger every time you roll it, and your dairy tolerance doesn't go up every time you eat it. I just wanted to define the term hormesis for you guys quickly because it can often get mentioned in conversations about inflammation. So how can you tell if you're inflamed? Do you need to go get your blood drawn or do a bunch of fancy testing? Fortunately not. You can actually see inflammation and you can feel it too. Have you ever looked at someone's face and thought, man, it sort of looks like someone stuck a bike pump in the side of their cheek and just started pumping away? That is inflammation. You can see it in the face, in the eyes. I'm sure you've had the experience of waking up and feeling like you can't open your eyes fully and like you're staring through pinholes. This is inflammation. You can see it and feel it in your hands as well. And a classic example is how your rings or watch are fitting. Loose or tight, right? Loose means minimal inflammation and tight means a bunch. How does your skin look? This is really important. Acne, pimples, discoloration, all of these things are signs of an inflammation-ridden body. Your skin is meant to glow. That's its default state. So if you've got funky skin at the moment, you're inflamed. You can also see and feel it when you tie your shoes, right? How much or how little lace do you have to work with? A lot of lace means less inflammation, and less lace means more. How generally tight does your shoe feel? Some days feel tighter, some days feel looser, right? That can tell you a little bit about inflammation. Do you have rings on your ankles when you take off your socks? That's another sign of water retention related inflammation. Do you have indents around your stomach when you take off your shorts or pants? All of these things are visual and sensory signs of inflammation. Now, you might be thinking, well, when I take off my pants or shorts, there's a line because I carry body fat in that area. And to some degree, that's true. But fun fact, it turns out that body fat itself is inherently inflammatory, meaning your body fat secretes or releases inflammatory substances into your body, meaning one of the best ways to reduce inflammation in general is to lose weight. So now that we've identified some examples of what inflammation looks and feels like, how do we manage it, right? How do we reduce it if need be? I'm going to break this section down into 4 categories, so nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress management. But let's start with nutrition. Digestion is an amazing indicator of inflammation from a nutritional standpoint. Are you bloated? Do you feel generally heavy, lethargic, and slow after eating? Or are you light, energetic, and clear? Obviously, the light, energetic, and clear feeling is going to be far less of an inflammatory state. So let's say you do feel heavy and lethargic after meals quite regularly. You are eating foods that you don't tolerate, and now it's up to you to figure out what those foods are. This is something that I really emphasize the importance of with my one-on-one nutritional coaching clients, because digestion is just so important, not only for your health, but just for your energy levels and sense of well-being as well. If you think about it, if your body is constantly sending resources to deal with inflammation via your diet, no wonder you're tired, because that's a lot of extra work for your body, and there are only so many resources to go around. Now, for most folks, eating single and minimal ingredient whole foods will often do the trick on the digestion front, and they'll feel amazing. But some people may need to get a little more granular around their intake and identify specific food sensitivities. I'll use myself as an example. Dairy doesn't work for me. My skin acts up almost immediately and lets me know that something I consumed ramped up inflammation. Also, if I eat too much gluten, I get a bit of eczema, typically on my hands, and occasionally some joint pain as well. So I'm super mindful of how much gluten-containing food I take in too. And then lastly, my skin doesn't like fried foods either, I've found. It may depend on what type of batter and or oil is used, but I limit fried foods in a big way because I just don't feel great after I eat them, and then again, my skin doesn't like them either. Now, the most common food intolerances are going to be grains, legumes, and dairy. Some folks don't tolerate corn or nightshades like eggplant, tomatoes, etc. Nightshade intolerance is moderately common, but nothing like grains, more specifically gluten, legumes, and dairy. Now, I'm not saying you can't be intolerant to anything else, but those are the most common culprits. So if you're finding yourself inflamed via your diet, that's probably the place where you want to start. On to movement. Not moving enough is an amazing way to ramp up inflammation, but ironically, so is moving too much. We want to take the Goldilocks approach around our movement practice. An example of too much movement might be a chronic marathon runner, not healthy, even though we tend to think that it is. And then someone who works a sedentary job and just sits a ton in general, that's also going to favor more inflammation from a lifestyle movement standpoint. Now, moving itself essentially exercises your lymphatic system. And I'm sure you've heard of lymph nodes before. They're all over your body. So moving quite literally flushes your body and staves off issues from stagnation. Now, this is why lymphoma is so dangerous, because once cancer gets into your lymphatic system, it flushes throughout your entire body, as opposed to staying in one place, like the pancreas, for example. And that's why it can be so detrimental. So we want to move a bunch in order to flush all that good stuff around. And the best way to do that for the average individual is via walking. Hit your 8,000 to 10,000 steps per day, and workouts are not a replacement for steps. Meaning, if you work out for an hour, that doesn't mean that you can be sedentary the rest of the day. Walking is a must, and then workouts are a bonus on top of that. Moving on to sleep. Now, when I'm thinking about inflammation in regards to sleep, I'm actually focusing mainly on the brain, because during sleep is when our brain does most of its house cleaning. So really cool point. While we sleep, our spinal cord secretes cerebral spinal fluid, or CSF, up into our brains and wash them out of harmful substances that naturally build up over the course of the day. You can think about it like power washing your brain, basically. It happens while you sleep. Now, you might think that you need to get some fancy tests done to find out whether there's inflammation going on in your brain, which, sure, you can do that, but more specifically, you can just monitor your normal daily performance. For example, reaction time. How quickly do you respond to someone cutting you off in traffic or something falling off the counter? Do you catch it or do you miss it? The response is going to be delayed when you've got inflammation going on because you're lacking sleep. The system doesn't respond as quickly when you're underslept. When clocks move forward in the spring in a lot of places, on the first Monday back to work, there's a big spike in car accidents. And funny enough, there's an actual reduction from normal in car accidents when the clocks move back. This stuff has been studied and it's due to sleep. Word and thought recall. How often do you forget the word that you're trying to use or say? We say it's on the tip of our tongues, right? This is a sign of inflammation and sleep debt. How often do you say, oh shit, what was I going to say again? Oh, it'll come to me. Forgetting too. How many times does it take you to leave your house in the morning? Do you forget your keys once, then your wallet the next time, then you miss a turn or take the wrong one to work? All of these things are signs as well. Now, the scariest thing about forgetting specifically is that not getting enough sleep has a very strong correlation to dementia and Alzheimer's because it turns out that we ingrain memories while we sleep. So let's say you're learning a new language. The same area of your brain that lit up while you were studying the language lights up again at night because we essentially replay these scenarios, and that's how memories go from short-term to long-term deposits. So if you're trying to learn something, but you're not sleeping enough, you are seriously impairing your progress. Now, I'm actually willing to say that lack of sleep is a causal factor in dementia and Alzheimer's because I think it's just a matter of time until the research is super clear here. To me, it's already money in the bank, but some folks have to have a double-blind, placebo-controlled study to make a statement like that, so I'm going to make it. Lack of sleep deteriorates your brain and makes it much more likely that you develop neurodegeneration. Now, the trickiest thing about monitoring your performance when it comes to sleep is that you might potentially be observing yourself from an impaired brain to begin with. So you're working with faulty machinery if you're trying to assess your performance while already being underslept. So for example, folks who are sleep deprived often think that they're performing at peak capacity and they'll say, I'm fine running off of 5 or 6 hours of sleep. And the truth is, you're just not. Sleep and performance has been studied over and over, and the research is clear. Our performance is really tightly correlated with our sleep habits. So how do you make sure that you're getting enough sleep? You wake up without an alarm in the morning, and that typically means for most folks that you need to go to bed earlier because the majority of people have a set time that they need to wake up in order to go to work. That's honestly it. If an alarm is waking you up every morning, the question becomes, when would you have woken up if it weren't for the alarm? And the answer is later than that. So when we're talking about sleep and inflammation, yes, the entire body repairs itself while we sleep and reduces inflammation and, muscles, joints, ligaments, all that sort of stuff. But I just personally think it's more interesting to focus on the brain aspect here because there are just such clear benefits and drawbacks around performance that you can assess and take notice of. Stress management. I've said this before and I'll say it again. When you button up your nutrition, movement, and sleep, you have less of a need for stress management strategies because, first of all, you can't replace nutrition, movement, or sleep, and lacking any one of them is actually a stressor in itself. So forget about stressful life events. You're going to be much better equipped to handle whatever life throws at you when you're eating healthfully, moving lots, and sleeping well. I do want to mention the stress management relationship around sleep quickly. You absolutely want to set yourself up for quality sleep by doing the following. Get 30 minutes of daylight exposure every day as early in the day as possible. Eat well, of course. Also move a bunch, so hit that 10K steps because being physically tired contributes to quality sleep. Exercise your brain because mental fatigue via learning is super conducive to deep sleep. And also minimize light exposure and stimulation at night and skip the electronics, TV, computer, etc. at least 30 minutes before bed. But let's say you're doing all of that stuff right and you're still having a hard time sleeping. There are mental and emotional factors at play, and this is where stress management strategies really shine. Writing, meditation, taking a bath, reading a book, reflecting, talking through your troubles. There are endless things to do here, but what's at the root of your sleep issue, if you find yourself in this situation, is that mental and emotional factors are restricting your ability to rest. So again, in a situation where you're doing everything right from a nutrition, movement, light exposure, and stimulation standpoint, if you're still having a hard time turning off your brain and or resting, there are mental and emotional factors at play that likely need to be addressed. So as we start to wrap up here, when it comes to minimizing inflammation that we don't want running rampant in the body, we land on the staples that work, right? They've always worked and they always will work. Quality food, moving your body, getting enough sleep, and managing stressors when need be. And if you're aware, your body will let you know exactly what it likes and what it doesn't like. It's just a matter of paying attention, and the longer you ignore the signals, unfortunately, the harder you're going to get hit down the road. So for example, I know that dairy doesn't agree with me, so I can eat it. But every time I do, there's just a little bit of damage to my body. And once every few months or maybe once every quarter, likely not a huge deal, but just know that that damage accumulates and it does add up over time. And that's essentially what aging is. Folks who accumulate more damage age faster. And folks who minimize damage age slower. This isn't anything that we don't already know. Folks who take great care of themselves physically, mentally, and emotionally look exactly like they take great care of themselves physically, mentally, and emotionally. It is written all over our faces and our bodies. Now, if you'd like to apply for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout programming with me, you can click the link in the show notes below or head over to n1fitness.com/coaching. Also, let's be friends. Add me on Instagram at N1Fitness and Marcus Sadu on Facebook, and be sure to hit subscribe on whatever podcast player you're using. Thanks so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya.